Everything in life is energy, including politics, power, and policy. And if you want to understand the forces shaping our world, you've got to rise above emotion and start thinking at a higher frequency. In the realm of international relations, perception is not just a passive lens. It is an active force that shapes decisions, fuels alliances, and defines national destinies. When we look at U.S. foreign policy, especially its engagement with Pakistan, what often appears on the surface is rarely the full picture. Perception is power, and those who understand how perceptions are crafted and manipulated can better grasp the underlying intentions behind policy decisions. It's easy to be misled by official statements, diplomatic language, or short-term actions. But behind every handshake, military aid package, and public condemnation lies a deeper strategic calculus, often invisible to the casual observer. The U.S. doesn't make decisions based solely on emotional loyalty or historical friendships. Instead, it operates through a lens of interest, national security interest, economic interest, and global positioning. The perception the U.S. projects toward Pakistan is part of a broader strategy, carefully designed to serve its own goals. For example, providing military aid to Pakistan may appear contradictory, especially when considering Pakistan's complex history with terrorism and its delicate relationship with India. But when you look deeper, you see that such moves are not endorsements. They are tools to maintain leverage in South Asia, to keep influence in regions close to China, and to avoid allowing any single power to dominate the strategic landscape. This is where the idea of perception as power becomes vital. Pakistan, in the eyes of the U.S., is not simply a partner or a problem. It is a pivot, a geographic and political pivot that offers the U.S. entry into crucial intelligence operations, military footholds, and counterbalance options. The narrative built around Pakistan is part of maintaining that perception, a narrative that may fluctuate but serves a function. At the same time, this perception affects India profoundly. India observes these dynamics not just as a neighboring power, but as a rising global player whose own strategic aspirations are constantly being recalibrated in response to perceived U.S.-Pakistan or imbalance. India's perception of U.S.-Pakistan relations often includes a sense of betrayal or disappointment, especially when America appears to downplay Pakistan's role in cross-border terrorism. But this emotional reaction, while understandable, can also obscure the deeper mechanics at work. The U.S. is not choosing sides based on moral grounds. It is choosing strategies based on utility. It may chastise Pakistan on one hand while quietly negotiating military logistics on the other. To truly understand this behavior, we must recognize that perception management is a key currency in foreign policy. It's not about truth. It's about the version of truth that serves a purpose. What the United States is doing, essentially, is maintaining a carefully crafted image in which it can continue to exert control over multiple players simultaneously. The U.S. must project stability to India while retaining access to Pakistan's geography and military pathways. It must appear neutral enough to mediate and involved enough to dominate. This balancing act is less about resolving conflict and more about retaining power. It's the art of managing perceptions in such a way that both Pakistan and India remain within America's sphere of influence without either becoming too powerful or too independent. For policymakers and observers in India, this is an opportunity to shift focus, not to react to the perception, but to understand its purpose. The emotional interpretation of U.S. policy often weakens India's position by creating an illusion of betrayal where there is, in fact, calculated neutrality. Once this is understood, India can craft its own strategy from a place of awareness rather than frustration, because in the realm of high-stakes diplomacy, those who can read beyond the surface, who can decode the language of perception, are the ones who ultimately gain power. Energy flows where attention goes. This principle, often applied to personal development, finds a powerful parallel in international relations. When we examine U.S. foreign policy, particularly its sustained focus on Pakistan, it becomes evident that attention is not distributed randomly. The persistent engagement with Pakistan through military aid, diplomatic visits, and strategic partnerships reflects a deliberate direction of energy. Despite global shifts and the rise of India as a regional powerhouse, Pakistan continues to receive a disproportionate share of U.S. attention, which tells us more about America's strategic mindset than its spoken commitments. This attention is not merely about history or habit, it is about present-day utility. The U.S. sees Pakistan as a key node in its broader geopolitical strategy. Its geographic proximity to Afghanistan, Iran, China, and India makes it an indispensable player in regional dynamics. It offers logistical advantages for military operations, a window into Taliban politics, and a counterweight to Chinese influence through initiatives like the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The U.S., though often critical of Pakistan's internal instability or its support for extremist proxies, does not reduce its engagement. Instead, it channels more resources, more intelligence cooperation, and more strategic dialogue into the relationship. This continued focus signals that, for Washington, Pakistan serves a function that India, despite its economic and democratic alignment, does not. When energy consistently flows toward Pakistan, it shapes perception, both within Pakistan and in the broader region. Pakistan, though economically strained and politically turbulent, derives power from this attention. It leverages its perceived indispensability to extract concessions, negotiate aid packages, and position itself as a necessary actor in any regional equation. Meanwhile, India, which has made strides in economic development, technological innovation, and global diplomacy, is often left to wonder why its partnership with the U.S. seems more symbolic than strategic. India expects that its democratic values, massive market, and regional stability would make it the natural choice for U.S. alignment. Yet the energy continues to flow toward a more unstable, less transparent neighbor. This imbalance of attention is not without consequence. It creates frustration among Indian policymakers who interpret the U.S.-Pakistan relationship as a contradiction to Washington's stated commitment to democratic allies. However, the reality is more pragmatic. The U.S. engages where it sees leverage, not loyalty. And Pakistan, with all its internal contradictions, continues to provide access points that the U.S. deems too valuable to ignore. Whether it's drone routes, intelligence on terror networks, or back-channel diplomacy with the Taliban, Pakistan offers transactional value that fits into America's realpolitik framework. The strategic implication for India is clear. Energy in international relations follows utility, not ideals. While India's alignment with the U.S. is grounded in shared values and long-term economic promise, it lacks the urgency and flexibility that Pakistan provides in crisis-driven diplomacy. This does not mean that India is less important, but it means that it plays a different role, a role that the U.S. does not need to engage with constantly, because it sees India as stable, predictable, and unlikely to pivot toward adversarial powers. By observing where energy flows, one can decipher where future investments, military priorities, and diplomatic overtures will unfold. This flow is not static, it evolves. And India, by understanding the deeper mechanics of attention and utility, can begin to craft a strategy that does not seek validation through U.S. focus, but leverages its position to attract sustainable engagement. Energy, once understood, can be redirected, and attention, once strategically earned, becomes a tool for influence. Recognizing this dynamic is essential for any nation that seeks to rise above reaction and move into mastery on the global stage. The law of cause and effect governs not just individual lives, but the dynamics between nations. In geopolitics, every action generates a ripple. Every policy triggers a consequence, and every alliance alters the balance of power. When the United States makes a move toward Pakistan, whether through military aid, diplomatic support, or public statements, it inevitably causes reactions in India's strategic outlook. This relationship is not linear or simplistic. It is complex and layered, influenced by decades of historical tension, regional ambition, and global power shifts. Yet at its core, it follows the same principle. causes produce effects, and those effects shape the world we live in. America's engagement with Pakistan often appears paradoxical. On one hand, it condemns terrorism and expresses concerns about regional instability. On the other, it funds military programs, signs security cooperation agreements, and maintains a quiet yet persistent channel of influence. This dual approach sends mixed signals to the region, especially to India. While India seeks to deepen its partnership with the U.S. based on shared democratic ideals and mutual strategic interest, it finds itself repeatedly forced to recalibrate its expectations each time the U.S. extends overtures toward Pakistan. The effect of this is a growing sense of skepticism within Indian strategic circles about America's reliability as a partner in the region. This skepticism is not born out of paranoia. It is the result of observable patterns. Each time the U.S. increases its engagement with Pakistan, India must reassess its own defense priorities. Questions arise about the flow of American military technology to Pakistan, about intelligence sharing that could affect Indian security, and about the political message being sent to global actors. The cause, a policy decision in Washington, leads to effects in New Delhi, where strategic planners must determine whether their trust in the U.S. is being reciprocated or undermined. Moreover, the law of cause and effect plays out internally within both countries. In Pakistan, American support often emboldens military and intelligence agencies, reinforcing their dominance over civilian leadership and discouraging reforms. This internal shift then produces further effects externally, such as increased support for proxy groups or renewed diplomatic hostility toward India. In turn, India is compelled to respond with military preparedness, regional diplomacy, and sometimes with caution that slows down cooperative initiatives with the U.S. The feedback loop is constant and reinforcing, where one nation's decision becomes another's strategic problem. The unintended consequences of U.S. policies toward Pakistan are not minor. They are structural. They affect regional arms races, trade policies, and the willingness of other nations to align with or distance themselves from American leadership. Each action carries a weight that goes beyond intention. While Washington may believe it can compartmentalize its relationships, the region experiences the full spectrum of outcomes. Trust erodes not through dramatic betrayals, but through consistent signals that suggest unpredictability and opportunism. This erosion becomes a major effect that influences long-term planning, not only in India, but across South Asia. India, by observing this cause and effect dynamic, is learning to navigate its own path with greater independence. It is strengthening ties with other global powers, investing in domestic defense industries, and diversifying its diplomatic outreach. Yet the awareness remains. Every American move in Islamabad echoes in New Delhi, and often with strategic consequences that far outweigh the original intention. This reality demands a higher level of discernment from both nations and an understanding that relationships in the geopolitical realm are never static. When cause and effect are ignored, nations become reactive. When they are understood, nations become strategic. India, to rise in this environment, must not only observe the causes, but anticipate the effects. It must learn to read the signs behind the policy decisions, decode the intent behind the gestures, and prepare responses that protect its interests without losing its global alignment. The game of power is not just about action. It is about anticipation. And anticipation begins with recognizing that nothing happens in isolation, and that every move made by one player creates new rules for everyone else. Strategic patience is one of the most underrated yet powerful tools in international relations. In a world where speed often substitutes for wisdom and reaction overshadows reflection, the ability to wait, to observe, and to respond with intention becomes a mark of true strength. India, as a rising power in the global order, finds itself at a critical junction where emotional responses to U.S. policy decisions, particularly its continued support of Pakistan, can be tempting. Yet, those who understand the deeper game know that reaction is rarely the right path. Strategic patience is not inaction. It is calibrated restraint. It is the deliberate choice to act only when action creates leverage, and to withhold when reaction would diminish influence. The U.S.-Pakistan dynamic frequently tests India's capacity for such patience. When the United States provides military aid to Pakistan or maintains intelligence sharing programs with a nation India considers a strategic and security threat, the immediate impulse may be frustration, even outrage. But emotional reaction does little to shift the underlying architecture of global power. The wiser approach is to recognize the temporary nature of such alignments and to focus on the broader arc of global trends. Strategic patience allows India to resist being pulled into cycles of complaint and to instead invest in building long-term strategic capital. One of the main advantages of patience is perspective. It grants the ability to differentiate between what is urgent and what is important. While U.S. policy decisions may seem urgent in the short term, the more important goal is to understand America's deeper strategic objectives. The U.S. operates from a mindset of utility. It supports Pakistan not out of trust or friendship, but because Pakistan offers logistical, geographical, and tactical value in short-term missions. These arrangements are transactional, not foundational. India, by contrast, offers long-term alignment based on democratic values, economic synergy, and mutual strategic goals. By practicing patience, India positions itself as a dependable and visionary partner rather than a volatile actor responding emotionally to every shift. This patience also provides India the time and space to strengthen its own foundation. While others play short games, India can play the long one, investing in indigenous defense capabilities, expanding diplomatic reach, deepening economic partnerships beyond the U.S. and China. These are the fruits of a patient strategy. When others are caught in cycles of dependency and reactive diplomacy, India can rise as an independent force with sovereign leverage. This doesn't mean turning a blind eye to provocations. It means choosing the time and place of response with care. Strategic patience also protects against manipulation. Nations that are quick to react are easier to control. When a country's emotional reactions become predictable, they can be used against it. A calculated show of support to a rival can trigger public anger, disrupt diplomatic planning, and fracture alliances. India must resist falling into this trap. By remaining steady and disciplined, it denies others the ability to provoke instability. Calm in the face of provocation is not weakness, it is control. It signals to both friends and rivals that India is a power that cannot be easily swayed or destabilized. The art of strategic patience is not passive. It is active observation, continuous recalibration, and forward thinking. It is built on the confidence that time is on your side when your foundation is strong. In the shifting tides of U.S. foreign policy, the nations that endure are not those that shout the loudest, but those that wait for the right moment to act decisively. Patience does not mean accepting injustice or compromising security. It means knowing when to speak and when to listen, when to respond and when to wait. It is the mastery of timing, and in international strategy, timing is everything. Alignment over attachment is a principle that reshapes how nations perceive their partnerships, especially in a complex geopolitical environment. The United States, as a global superpower, does not engage in relationships based on emotional bonds or historical loyalty. It operates on strategic alignment, on mutual benefit, shared interests, and the flexibility to shift course when national goals demand it. Understanding this truth is essential for India, especially as it navigates its expectations around U.S. engagement and observes the continued attention Washington gives to Pakistan. The U.S. is not attached to Pakistan, nor is it loyal to India in a romanticized sense. It is aligned where it sees advantage, and it moves where it sees opportunity. The distinction between alignment and attachment explains much of what appears contradictory in U.S. foreign policy. At times, the U.S. may praise India's democratic resilience, economic growth, and regional leadership, only to turn around and engage with Pakistan through defense agreements, aid packages, or strategic dialogues. To the untrained eye, this appears disloyal or inconsistent, but from a strategic viewpoint, it is highly consistent. The U.S. is aligning itself with what is useful at a particular moment. Pakistan offers tactical support, air routes, counter-terror intelligence, pressure points on Afghanistan and Iran, while India offers long-term stability, a massive consumer base, and technological cooperation. Both serve different purposes, and America's engagement with each is shaped by how those purposes evolve. This understanding liberates India from the emotional expectations that often accompany international relationships. Attachment leads to disappointment when expectations are not met. Alignment leads to clarity. It allows India to engage with the U.S. not as a dependent seeking approval, but as a partner asserting its own strategic priorities. When India realizes that loyalty is not the currency in these relationships, it can negotiate more effectively. It can build its leverage, set its boundaries, and hold firm to its national interests without feeling betrayed when the U.S. makes a move that appears contrary. At the same time, this principle highlights the necessity for India to become more adaptable in its own foreign policy. Instead of reacting with disappointment or frustration, it can respond with recalibrated strategies. This includes strengthening regional partnerships with nations like Japan, Australia, and the UAE, enhancing economic and defense collaboration with Europe, and building more autonomous defense capabilities. When India aligns itself with a broader set of interests, it becomes less dependent on any single power. The U.S. has no permanent friends or enemies, only shifting alignments. That philosophy has served it well on the global stage, allowing it to adjust quickly to changing realities. India can take a page from this approach by focusing on strategic alignment rather than ideological attachment. This doesn't mean abandoning values or principles. It means understanding that values alone are not always the basis for engagement. Power respects power, and respect in diplomacy comes not from pleading for attention, but from becoming indispensable in strategic terms. When India approaches its relationship with the United States through the lens of alignment, it can better anticipate American behavior. It can see the logic behind aid to Pakistan, or understand the quiet diplomacy behind certain defense arrangements. Rather than taking such actions personally, India can use them as signals to adjust its own positioning. In doing so, it moves from reaction to strategy, from frustration to foresight. This shift is not only practical, it is empowering. It puts India in the driver's seat of its foreign policy, guiding it based on national interest, strategic clarity, and a mature understanding of how global power truly operates. Every nation must decide whether it wants to be a pawn on the global chessboard or a player shaping the moves. Power is not just about economic strength or military capability. It is about narrative control. Whoever controls the narrative controls perception, and whoever controls perception can influence outcomes before a single bullet is fired or treaty signed. For India, this is the critical frontier in the evolving U.S.-Pakistan-India triangle. The United States may make strategic moves toward Pakistan, but the deeper battle is for the narrative. If India allows others to define its position, interpret its silence, or project its intent, it forfeits control over how it is perceived. In contrast, if it takes command of its own narrative, it gains influence not just in Washington, but on the world stage. The U.S. is a master at narrative management. It positions itself as the promoter of democracy, the defender of freedom, the global stabilizer, even when its policies contradict those very messages. That power comes not from flawless actions, but from persuasive storytelling. India, while possessing credibility and strength, has not always been assertive in shaping its narrative, especially in response to U.S. engagements that undermine its security perceptions. To reclaim its narrative power, India must first stop waiting for validation. It must recognize that its strength lies not in being acknowledged by others, but in asserting its own worldview. That means clearly articulating its red lines, its vision for the region, and its strategic boundaries. When the U.S. engages with Pakistan, India's response must not be one of silent discomfort or behind-the-scenes protest. It must communicate, with clarity and consistency, how such actions are interpreted and how they affect the regional balance. This is not about ultimatums. It is about shaping understanding. Narrative power also means controlling the storyline at home and abroad. Domestically, the Indian public must be educated about the realities of global diplomacy, about alignment, not attachment, and about strategy over sentiment. Internationally, Indian diplomats, scholars, media, and influencers must project a coherent voice. When India speaks, the world must know what to expect, not because it is predictable, but because it is principled. That consistency builds trust, and trust is a form of power in geopolitics. India's narrative must emphasize its role as a responsible power, a regional stabilizer, and a democratic partner that brings long-term value to any alliance. It must highlight its commitment to global rules, its innovation potential, and its contributions to global challenges like climate change, cybersecurity, and counterterrorism. At the same time, it must unapologetically expose the double standards it faces. When the U.S. supplies arms to Pakistan or downplays cross-border threats that India faces, India must make that contradiction visible, not through outrage, but through reasoned, strategic communication that resonates with allies and neutral players alike. Controlling the narrative also means investing in intellectual and cultural influence. Think tanks, universities, media houses, and diplomatic institutions must work in harmony to produce and disseminate India's perspective. Global discourse is shaped not just by what leaders say, but by what experts, journalists, and academics repeat. If India does not fill that space, others will fill it for her, with distortions, half-truths, or simplified versions that do not reflect its complexity or its power. Ultimately, narrative is not just about words, it is about positioning. A powerful narrative makes others take your concerns seriously even before you speak. It establishes you as a stakeholder whose voice matters. It ensures that your silence is interpreted as strategy, not weakness. For India to rise, it must understand that narrative power is not optional, it is essential. Without it, economic and military strength will always be reactive. With it, even quiet actions can echo loudly across the world.